Good afternoon, everyone. So sorry for the delay, but here we are at the last session at the ISA Pavilion, the Solar Hub. Through the 2 weeks, we've talked about the various technologies of solar, from mini grids, from rooftop, large-scale solar farms, even floating solar, green hydrogen, and through all of it, we've talked about the importance of energy access, energy security, energy transition, and we've talked about how solar energy can help with ensuring that. To carbon emissions, just removing all of that and just focusing on what it is for what solar energy does for human development. So I welcome all of you here today and all those who are streaming live to the last session at the Solar Hub. And without much ado, I'd like to first request Honorable Minister Madhu Katamoto Nalumisa, the Honorable Minister for Housing and Local Government of Fiji, to deliver his opening remarks. Sir, may I please invite you?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We are now on the last lap of our journey here at COP28. And I think the topic that we'll be deliberating on and also sharing some experiences of this afternoon is a very important topic. And I like the idea of the title itself, Illuminating Possibilities. I think something that is very vital. It's also important for any country. While taking into consideration some of the developments and some of the possibilities that solarization can benefit any country. I'm going to share with you some of the experiences that we have had at our country, Fiji. And for you, if you don't know where Fiji is, it's a small, tiny island that floats somewhere in the South Pacific. It's closer to New Zealand and also close to Australia. I'm deeply honored to be part of the session organized by ISA. I must thank the ISA on solar energy's contribution to sustainable human development. As I alluded to earlier, it's a very important topic that all of us need to value and also share the importance of this topic. Energy is the heart of human development and increases productivity by accelerating social improvement. Energy affects the people, communities, and countries directly in terms of economic growth, health, safety, environment, education, and employment. As the world grapples with the challenge of climate change and depleting fossil fuel reserves, solar energy plays a pivotal role in advancing human development by offering a sustainable and eco-friendly environment alternative to traditional or conservative energy sources. The decentralized nature of solar energy especially plays a crucial factor in our country, Fiji. Recognizing this advantage, Fiji, through various projects and programs, has benefited from solar energy by fostering economic development and improving the living standards of our people. I'm pleased to share that Fiji has implemented programs like solar home systems, or SHAs, and microgrid systems, which has had vast socio-economic benefits to our people. The Fiji Solar Home System program provides electricity primarily for lighting for remote households located in rural areas where electricity supply is not feasible, mostly in the remote and also the maritime areas of our country. The Fiji Solar Home System program is successful at the broadest level, in that the program's objective of using solar home systems to provide electricity for lighting for rural households is being achieved, and there is a high reported level of user satisfaction and improvements in the quality of life of the users of these communities that have benefited from through this program. Being part of the transitional change from darkness to sustainable power supply is the most life-enriching and priceless experience for one and all. The students have access to better lighting and internet connectivity. The health facilities are equipped with better medical facilities and services, better telecommunication services or networks, and more economic activities for members of the community. I would like to convey our appreciation to ISA for recently assisting us in installation of 2 solar health facilities in 3 remote villages in our country. The islands, these 3 villages are located on 2 small islands and are a bit far away from the main centers. This project provides 24-hour solar power supply to the 2 facilities. The benefits and impacts of these 2 solar projects on our islands are immeasurable. I've been advised that the ISA will carry out further studies on the remaining health centers and schools in the next phase of the project. It's also worth noting that ISA is also collaborating with my ministry in relation to pilot project to solarize housing block containing aging of 24 flats. I'm from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, and we have just partnered with ISA on piloting a project which is going to supply solar energy to one of our housing estate. It's like it's an accommodation that provides rental to those people who can't afford to buy and own properties. And as per initial assessment, a 20 kilowatt ground or off-grid solar, hybrid solar with battery storage of 240 kilowatts is being deliberated upon. So as we speak, we are working with ISA on this particular project. In addition, discussions are underway with an aim to carry out a feasibility study on solarizing the transport sector through solar ferries as well as solarizing coal storages. We are indeed grateful for such initiatives that are beneficial to our communities, and we look forward to more partnerships to ensure appropriate energy supply to the communities. Ensuring that energy supply is more affordable, reliable, environmentally friendly, and safer will contribute to sustainable economic development, as increased use of renewable energy will reduce greenhouse gases and improve access to energy for the poorest member of our society. Ladies and gentlemen, promoting human development should not be the goal that could guide all public policies, which aim at ensuring that the population as a whole enjoys better living conditions and also their well-being. This will enable the expansion of their capabilities and freedom. With those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to dialogue, which we call back at home talanoa, means discussion and valuable inputs by all the panelists this afternoon. Thank you very much. Navali.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Your opening remarks, I think, beautifully set the context for the discussion we have today, or I should say taloma that we have today. Talanoa that we have today. It is, ISA is extremely happy to work with Fiji, partner with Fiji, and we see great potential in the collaboration that we see. I mean, we see Fiji as maybe a country that can exemplify what we are trying to achieve. And what you beautifully said about how human development should not be the goal, but it should be for everyone to enjoy better living standards. I think organizations who are working towards the promotion of solar energy, like ISA, keep that to our heart. And with that, I'd like to, move to the panel discussion that we have today. We have organizations who are working in this sector, talking about what they've seen to be the impact of solar energy on human development. So I'd like to welcome the panelists for today. First would be Mr. Kamran Siddiqui. He is the Associate Program Officer, Energy Access at IRENA. Then we have Mr. Nar Bahadur. He's the program specialist APAC in ISA. And we have Surbi Rajgopal, the senior program manager from Selco Foundation. Um, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as so, I think I'd start with you, Kamran, because I know that in this COP you've launched the initiative, which is the Empowering Lives and Livelihood Initiative, and that is very interesting because IRENA again works on renewables, and to come and talk about say lives and livelihoods. So maybe you'd want if we could hear from you, how did this name come up, and what was the intent behind this initiative? That would be wonderful.
Yeah. No, first of all, thanks for your invitation. I mean, when we talk about the human development, Honorable Minister was talking about that covering the all segments of the society, and this is exactly what our approach is under this initiative. And the idea basically comes from the point of view of raising the lives and livelihoods of the people living in rural settings as well as those communities which are marginalized. I mean, for the context, we selected agriculture and health mainly because these are the sectors which basically most of the humans rely on. So, for example, in agriculture, 2.5 billion people have reliance on agriculture. 1.5 billion more on those who are small farmers or families which are small farmer holders. Again, on the health side, it's a 1 billion number as we hear that those with unreliable or no electricity, with around 450 million without electricity at all. So we actually thought that this number is so huge that we should really come up with a initiative that covers those segments of the society from the energy point of view. And when we say energy, basically we see energy as an enabler for these for agriculture and health, and in fact for all sustainable development goals. So what we are trying to do under this initiative is to first, on the agriculture side, try to cover the whole value chain of the agriculture. So not just for irrigation, but also irrigation, production, processing, cold storage to retail. And the idea is to first assess and map out the entry points for renewable energy solutions, and then provide a tailored solutions for each entry point or each nodal point, so that we actually electrify the whole value chain. So, for example, we are working in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Guinea. We're very soon starting work in Cuba as well. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, we actually went to the market, and where we saw that if we come up with a solution that is only one solution, for example, for irrigation, it actually creates a market disruption because it will increase the productivity. But then, if there is no cold storage, there will be a more food loss. But if you come up with a solution for cold storage, but then if there is no market, the market there will be an additional cost for cold storage, but still no market. For market, you need like more value-added products, so which means processing comes into play. So that's why our idea is to come up. Idea was to come up with an initiative that covers the whole value chain. So that's on the agri part. On the health part, again, we are covering with support from Selco Foundation. There are key partners in Burkina Faso, Mali, Mozambique, again in Zimbabwe and Sao Tome and Principe. And the idea is to electrify those health facilities through solar PV mainly, and not just come up with a solution for electrification, but also cover the energy efficient part of the equipment and machinery, as well as the built environment part. So again, covering the whole value chain, and come up with the technical designs and costs, which actually give us some form of an estimate and technical designs for implementation. Lastly, our idea is to not just finish the assessment, but take the assessment to develop a country program and then use that country program for implementation. So it really is a three-phase process that we are following in around 13 countries around the globe as a pilot countries. And the approach really is that once we rely on the knowledge that we gathered through primary data collection, develop into a plan of action through country program, and then in parallel mobilize finance for implementation. So it's actually a package for all our member states that we have been working on.
Thank you, Kamran. I think one of the very key points you talked about was the value chain and ensuring that that value chain exists. I think I'll move to Surbi now, and I just wanted to, understand from you, when we talk about, say, ensuring that the value chain exists, that also means like setting up an entire ecosystem around it, which can ensure that you have at every level you have people who know and understand what needs to happen, and there's a market for it, and there's enough funding available to kind of bring people in. So maybe if your perspective on how do you ensure that there is an entire ecosystem that exists for solar energy to actually be promoted and deployed, and what is the impact that you see from it on human development, from a human development perspective as well?
Thank you so much. So I think adding to what Kamran was talking about, just taking that example itself within the agri value chain or within a dairy value chain, I think the first part of a lot of our approach is to say, how do you innovate, right? So what is the need on the ground? We've understood that need, but we understand it in partnership with the farmers or the local communities, as well as local NGOs and organizations that are working with those farmers, or the agriculture department representatives that are on the ground. They help articulate that problem statement, after which we try and say, what are the kind of technology solutions. So I think we've reached the stage with solar energy where that it is a versatile enough source that whether you're seeing it as a standalone system, a microgrid, or a grid backup system, the ability to install it comes in as next part. But that the technology of the energy system functions. So we go into trying to figure out what are those efficient appliances that could then address this problem, right? And benchmark those technologies from an innovation perspective. And then trying to see how do they address the need on the ground. What is the kind of usage pattern that the end user has? So for example, when you're looking at something like an agriculture cold storage solution, you're trying to figure out, is it a 2 metric ton that's required or a 5 metric ton unit, right? Does it need to be a model where a person is just storing it and taking it away, or is it that it is owned by a cooperative that is then buying the entire purchase and selling it on? There's some basic technical and technology related testing, and that kind of forms the innovation piece of it, where you're starting to benchmark and say, for an individual entrepreneur, this is how it might look. For a small women's group, it might look like this. For a farmer producer group, it might look like this. And these are the kind of technology capacities that exist that can then be powered. And the next phase is when you start to talk about scale and implementation, where you're connecting it with what is the financial institution that can provide loans for this solution, especially in agriculture. And if the financial institution cannot provide a loan that matches the cash flow of the end user, how do we bring in that gap support, right? Today, we can push for banks to try and lend at for 10 years at 5% interest. But if they're not doing that and they're only able to lend for 5 years at 15% interest, that gap for the end user or the micro entrepreneur or the farmer needs to be filled from somewhere else. And that's where I think existing philanthropic resources need to come in as gap support to prove that the solution can work if the financing was provided in an appropriate manner. And then linking it to policy as well. A lot of government agencies are looking to say, how do you improve agriculture infrastructure? How do you improve, in the Indian context, we have the Prime Minister's formalization of micro businesses scheme, right? This is a scheme that provides for a 35 to 50% capital subsidy support and the remaining given out by the bank. And we're trying to see how can you use that for a solar-based livelihood asset so that you're covering that gap funding requirement and putting it into place. So I think that ecosystem of the technology manufacturers for the efficient appliances, the energy system providers and their technical capacity on the ground, the financing, which is a mix of local financial resources, banks, non-banking financial corporations, farmer groups' own corpus fund, plus gap support and government policy unlocking is quite critical. And I think just the last point, which is the same people who were involved in articulating that farmers' need are also very important in enabling the market linkage for that output, right? I can increase productivity by 20% and 30% with this solar-powered sewing machine or solar-powered cold storage unit. But if there is no market to sell, that is it's completely obsolete and irrelevant as far as the end user is concerned.
Thank you so much, Surbi. I think you touched upon two very important aspects which even ISA has recognized as being issues. One, of course, is the financing from banks, because I think a lot of times what happens is, unlike other projects where you may have revenues or profits coming in early, in solar projects it takes time. So that, making banks understand that and understand how to look at a solar project and how do you finance it, or how do you benchmark it? That's something that we have been doing through a bankers training that ISA provides. This is essentially to make them understand the technicalities of a project and also help them finance such projects. I think the other initiative that ISA has is the Global Solar Facility, which provides a payment guarantee and it's a payment mechanism where we try and fill the gap that you mentioned. And I think one of the key points you also talked about was piloting projects, right, to show the value of it. And that's something we've done through demo projects. And I have with me Nar, who would be, who's in the programs team and maybe can elaborate on how he's seen demo projects actually actually impacting, countries, and how is it helped with human development.
Thank you. Hello? Yes. Working, right? Thank you, Sunena, for this. And foremost, let me also actually very good afternoon to everybody and extend regards and greetings from our Director General to Honorable Minister here. A very pertinent point actually touched from both from livelihood to innovations, and then also how can we bring out and then the demonstration project that we have done. And let me go back a little bit, one step back, and then try to actually just highlight about the particular actually fundamental from our ISIs, because we are more as a action-oriented, member-driven collaborative platform. And from there, if you look at those terminology, then we are also a solution-centric organization where we work with our member countries closely, because it's a member-driven and we do not drive ourselves first. That means for this pilot, then if you look at the solution-centric approach, when we have followed, then we have since 2020, we're working with around 27 member countries for the pilot demonstration project. Besides that, we are now currently working with around 54 countries in terms of programmatic support across our member countries. So particularly highlighting on the demonstration projects, so when we started actually, then it is also distributed across the member countries. If you look at then our around 17 countries are in the African region, that and by large it is also because if you look at the energy, let's say access, there's around currently around 675 million people do not have access to electricity, and by and large 50% of them are in the sub-Saharan and African region, and that makes that actually the larger pool in that. And we have around 4 countries in the Latin American Caribbean region, and we have around 6 countries in the Asian Pacific region. So in total we have 27 pilot projects ongoing. And already a little bit touched about. Now I would like to fragment those projects where we have looked at, because based on the expression of interest from our member countries, as I said, is a member-driven. Then we have got expression of interest and different needs of the member countries. Based on the different needs, the situation the country has, and then also the country development priorities, because based on that, and then they have expressed interest. And if you look at the projects, we have around 10 projects are around solar water pumping, of which, let's say, one is on RO, and remaining 7 is irrigation pumps, for example. And we have around 8 projects are for the solarizing of health centers. And if you look at, and the 4 projects are for cold storage, and another 5 of them, of which one is for street lighting, and around 4 of them are for solarizing the government buildings, are also very important as schools. And from the perspective of human development that we're discussing, and how can I connect and touch these different dimensions that we're working with our member countries. And let me start with first education. In the Human Development Index, if you look at this, then it comes health, education, living standard, and well-being. These are the 4, I think, main parameters that actually gauges about the human development. And once we start looking the electricity access rate, then we're also going far from the grid that we have existed, and then that becomes our challenge, because then there's a cost involved. And we have already yesterday, Sudhanshu beautifully presented on the presentation about the energy, universal energy access. And how can we go about? First is that you go first with the existing grid, how much you can extend. And beyond that, then there needs to be other decentralized solar solutions. And even I think, should we, I will not repeat that word, not to say about sort of home lighting system, we have pointed out that, let's say, standalone system, that's something that is going to come up. And I would like to now give one example of this, how we are doing. For example, school. We have already completed 13 of these projects commissioned, and other are different stages of implementations. And for Kiribati, for example, we have completed a commission for school. And school is very, very important. Already, actually, I didn't have to stress much, as Excellency already mentioned in his opening remarks, but just to reiterate the importance, because if schools are not electrified, then what happens is that the kids, those who are going in the schools, will not have the education that they are going to empower. And at the same time, internet facilities, currently digitalization is happening. And otherwise, again, not only schools, then when the school, they're located in the far remote area, then we need to again electrify the household as well. And how it correlates is that the school kids back home, they have to depend on the traditional use of energy. And sometimes if there's a treasury of picking of, I think, like, for example, if they're using firewood, or if they have to depend on the kerosene for even lighting or for cooking and other applications, they have to go, and then there's a laborious task. And how can we address that? So solar can be one, and that is directly, indirectly actually helps in the human development and education. If we are talking about, then educating the youth means educating our nation and educating our future. That means that's very, very essential in the human development context. Second, health. If we come back to health, then like we have commissioned in Fiji already, Excellency here, we have commissioned 2 health centers. And health, if we talk about it, then reliability of power is more important, because health is always government has prioritized, and it has been considered, and some form of energy is given there. But if we go from the center, and if we go a little bit outskirt, then we say the reliability of power is not there. So how can we bring it a reliability into that? Because health services are very, very essential, because there are infant mortality rate, there are child and mother. That's health is also very, very important in that respect. And adequate services can be provided without having a reliable power supply. Even simple ultrasound cannot be done if we don't have reliable power supply, for example. In that context, health comes very, very important, and in the human development perspective, and we are also trying our best. And then if I give one example for UNDP, actually what they did was that they have electrified around 900 health centers, for example, in African countries. And from their studies, what they said is that the investment can be recovered within 2 to 4 years, and then there's 100% reliability can be improved. And if we are talking about energy access, universal energy access, that's 2030 is our target. But we have not talked about reliability of energy. That means solar can play a vital role in providing reliability. That is also very much important, because by definition of universal energy access, goal 7 of SDGs, it says universal energy access, then reliable is there, modern and sustainable. So reliable comes to play there. And the third one is livelihood. I just want to touch about, because drinking water is very, very important, as well as solar pumps that we are talking about. And if you look at the solar pump, we have actually commission in Tonga also. It's considered our Asia Pacific region itself. And then solar pumping is essential, because agriculture is a livelihood. And solar irrigation pumps also, again, talks about a livelihood as well as the value chains, the entire value chains. And again, groundwater, we need to again pump it in the surface, or it depends the contextual country to country. It's not actually one fits all, because some countries, like for example the Himalayan region, they have to again pump it from the gorges to the up in the valleys. And then maybe then we can have the gravitational flow canals to flow. But in certain plains, we do not have gravitational flow that we need to even pump to the end user's perspective. And then how can we bring that livelihood improvement from the income generation, from the agricultural productivity, for example? That's where actually we're also working on to that segment, that is the solar pumping. And now, again, parliamentary building, that's very, very important, because yesterday we discussed about ESG governance. And parliamentary building also we have ratified in Malawi, for example, we have commissioned. And now any of the government decisions are to be made in the parliament, and they had a challenge that there's no reliable power, then they have to, they were adjourning their parliamentary session and they have to postpone. That means all the decision-making process cannot happen because without parliamentary sessions, and that means that will directly, indirectly, it is affects policies. If policy affects, then again, the human development in that perspective. So if you look at all these cumulatively our projects that we're targeting at pilot demonstration projects, these are directly or indirectly benefiting the human development. What do you?
Thank you, Nar. I think you've given me such a detailed answer. It's made my job a lot harder, because now I'll have to struggle to find questions for the other panelists. But I think one of the things that Kamran, maybe you could talk about, since you've after the initiative, is you talked about last mile connectivity and how it is essential that organizations who are working on renewables also look at last mile connectivity. So I just wanted to understand from you, if keeping in mind that Narazo, I think, covered most of the points, but if there's anything that you feel like, when we talk about last mile connectivity, why is it so important for human development?
Yeah. So when it comes to last mile or remote communities, connectivity, I mean, it is important because energy is actually essentially as I said, the enabler for any type of development, for growth. But I think when we talk about the technological aspect of the last mile community, recently we actually published a guidebook on sustainable and successful approaches for transitioning the remote communities. And what we have come up with that solar energy as the main source can provide or electrify those last mile communities. What we relied on was like nine case studies from across the geographies, and what we have found out is that most of the time, the solar PV, mini grid, or solar home systems are utilized by the communities, the last mile communities, in a more of a community-centric models, where they own the assets and then also operate and maintain it. So what it does actually is to first create an employment within those communities. Secondly, it creates a productive use of that energy that basically they can use for products and for other services, which actually in return gives them the revenue. They can also use that energy for social infrastructure like education, for healthcare, for other public services. So ultimately, it uplifts the overall socioeconomics of those communities. I mean, just coming back to the statistics, we now know that around 675 million people don't have electricity access, and we actually also analyze, based on some GIZ analysis, that if we have to electrify those communities, solar home systems and mini grids actually will have to be deployed for around 62% of those 675 if we have to electrify them, which means that again solar will come into play mainly from the context of modularity, flexibility in terms of reaching to the last mile communities. So overall, the energy intervention, be it through any source, but has to be sustainable and clean. It really uplifts the economics in those communities, their lives, their livelihoods, as well as their earning and overall social uplifting. Because it's basically a cycle. When they start earning, they start producing, they start earning, they start investing on their own, they start investing in the infrastructure, and it uplifts the overall infrastructure in those communities. So this is what we have found out. In ARENA, in the energy access team, we mainly work with the rural communities, the communities in mountains, in islands, as well as communities which are indigenous, even to the point that communities which may not be geographically remote but remotely connected to the grid, like refugee settings. And for that, we actually go with the solution distributed renewable energy solution most of the time through solar PV, for providing them a solution which they can use for their for their productive use as well as for social infrastructure.
So I think you touched upon a very important point, and just to maybe really summarize it into one word would be inclusivity. When you talk about, providing connectivity to remote areas, to refugees, to island nations where maybe there are people in different islands who don't have access to the grid. So we are essentially looking about inclusivity. I think. I'll move to you, Surbhi, and I'll ask you, how do you see solar energy playing a role of inclusivity in terms of human development?
Thank you. I think the inclusion piece, for us is something where you're saying, okay, you can look at rural communities, last mile communities, but there are certain marginalized groups and vulnerable groups, and how do we take note of their needs and interests? At one level, we look at it from the perspective of climate risks and disasters, communities that are particularly vulnerable to that. So drought-prone areas, flood-prone areas. So in the riverine islands of the northeast of India, flooding is an annual reality, right? Every August this happens. So how are we making sure that the health facilities that we design there and solar power in those areas are also looking at built environment structures that are disaster resilient? How are they becoming, in a way, information hubs perhaps, because that is the space that people can then use at the time of a disaster or a flood when they're going to be cut off at least for that 3 days to 1 week, depending on the scenario. So one level is looking at inclusivity from the perspective of disaster-affected areas. Cyclone-prone as well as flood-prone are the areas that we've looked at because of East India and Northeast India. But the other level is also to look at individuals and communities who are vulnerable. And one of the, we've been looking at, and this happened very organically. It wasn't an active effort. But we started working in areas where organizations that were working with differently abled people were present, right? So there's an association for people with disabilities, which is an organization that works on mobilizing individuals and their families if they have been affected by a disability, particularly working on locomotor-related disabilities, where there's a lot of risk of and because of occupational hazard, it often affects male people when you're looking at spinal cord injuries because of falls. But there's also a lot of people surprisingly affected by polio, which we've all assumed is eradicated, right? And you still see that there's a section of the population in rural communities affected by polio. So we so far have worked with about 600 individual entrepreneurs, and these are people whose locomotor skills may have been affected, but you're then working with them to say what are the kind of solar powered livelihoods that you might be able to take up. So I'll take one example of Mr. Hanumantappa, who is in South India. He fell off a ladder while doing his job and ended up with a spinal cord injury. The Association for People with Disabilities works, which is a local organization, works on rehabilitation efforts, which includes social support, psychological support, support to caregivers as well, and trying to see, are there individuals from that group who are physically able to take up some kind of employment? So in addition to managing their, starting to be rehabilitated into managing their own lifestyles, are they able to take up anything else? And there are certain, let's say, occupations that can still be done. And of course, it requires a lot of psychological resilience and willpower from those individuals. But APD as an organization has tried to identify individuals who might be interested in taking up self-employment. And so what we were able to work with Mr. Hanumantappa to say, okay, he was interested in this flat bread making business. In India, it's called roti rolling or like chapati rolling. And it is it's a business where people make rotis at home and sell it to restaurants. And that is like a daily source of income, right? So Mr. Hanumantappa wanted to run this solar-powered roti rolling machine. And what hadn't occurred to us when we first installed the system was that it's a pedal-operated system, just because the technology is such that you push the pedal down and it comes down and rolls the roti, right? So as soon as we implemented it with him, it made us realize that we've not been very inclusive in our design, but it pushed us to think about how do you modify the technology so that someone on a wheelchair can also use it, and then we made this hand-operated one. So similarly, we worked on modifications and retrofitting of solar-powered sewing machines, solar-powered food processing equipment that can be run by individuals. The market linkage, the financing channels are all very different. You cannot expect a person who is on a wheelchair to have the same market linkages as someone who could be driving around and selling their produce. But what it gives them is, one, a sense of some level of economic addition into the family income. Two, it allows family members to earn a bit more of an income source because they are no longer just caregivers, right? Then, and the third component is, of course, the psychological impact that it has on these individuals. So we're now working with different district departments to say, you have resources for maybe assistive technologies. Can you expand that to say additional livelihood technologies that these individuals can access? And I think here it's worth also for us to be a little more futuristic in how we think. So wheelchairs that can be solar powered, but also allow for mobility where people can, use it to go up and clean their panels, like it's kind of like it's called a wheelchair lift or something to that effect. So we're also exploring futuristic technologies that can be powered off of solar that are part of that enabling environment itself, right? To clean a solar panel, if I'm an individual entrepreneur or a household and am affected by a certain disability, I need to be able to access that. So I think there are opportunities to look at disaster affected contexts, differently abled people, certain vulnerable groups, and innovate with them to see what kind of solutions and technologies can be powered off of solar energy.
That is beautiful. I'm so, this is such a beautiful, inspirational story that you spoke about. And that really, when you spoke about you'd not thought of it's operated by a paddle, I think that's one of the issues that you often face, because if you've not had that kind of special needs, if I can say that, then you often don't think about it. But actually to, link solar with, to make it more inclusive is absolutely beautiful. I think what you talked about was also the psychological effect, right? And I think I'll go to Nar because he is a Bhutanese citizen, and I'd want him to take off his ISA hat for a minute and then talk about maybe the gross national happiness index that Bhutan has, and how solar energy can possibly contribute or is contributing to the happiness in Bhutan.
Thank you, Sonaina, for taking off my hat and then a surprise gift that you have given me. I would like to admit that I'm not a happiness expert, though, but again, it's a great privilege and honor to speak about my country because it's a happiness country, as many of people know that. But again, it's not that because again, I am very proud to say that actually it's not only a carbon neutral but carbon negative country in the world, and it's the only country where complete energy is from renewable energy sources. And again, I think we have two countries. Republic of Suriname, I think from Latin America, is also a carbon negative country. So I think with that, and how could we achieve that? And then I think a lot of things, I think whatever we talked about, let me, I think, group up into that. And before that, again, a little bit I will give about what GNH is about. I think before I come to your question, Sunaina, please give me some time because I think it is very important to a little bit explain about what gross national happiness is all about. Gross national happiness is a conceptual, actually, a framework that guided Bhutan's development process and even a sustainable development path since 1972. That time, when His Majesty the Fourth King, King Jigme Wangchuk, he came onto the throne. And since then, the whole focus was that time, the whole development was particularly driven by economic model, and that time it was called gross national product, and today it is replaced by gross domestic product, GDP and GNP that time. And which is the pathways you want to choose for development, whether you want to choose the economic model, and particularly economic model one today is even the development concept is based on GDP or economic growth, and that actually does not come actually at some cost, and that's why we're debating even today at COP28 why we need to have because it will come at some cost of ecological, psychological, even spiritual, and emotional well-being. And that's where we're debating today why we need to have a sustainable development. That's the word, the concept of sustainable development or green economy or decoupling of that comes into play. On the other hand, when we are talking about happiness, I don't want to define happiness now, but I think let me go with our development actually. Then, since then, 1972, it was particularly whether it is a policies, projects, or programs are aligned towards GNH values, and particularly there are around we consider four pillars of gross national happiness. The first pillar is about sustainable and equitable socioeconomic development. That's about the socioeconomic pillar. And the second second pillar is about environment, that is conservation of environment or conservation of fragile ecology. That is particularly we are in the Himalayan country, that's a small country, Bhutan, between China and India, very big giants, and we're in a small country there. And the third pillar is about the preservation and promotion of our cultural heritage. It's a cultural pillar. And all of this will not work unless we have a good governance. And that we have seen that actually, even I think I would like to repeat the first GNH secretary was the commissioner here. Then I think he beautifully said that we can hear in the TVs actually, if the good governance is not there, then where is the happiness actually? So where does that good governance comes from there? So these are the four pillars of gross national happiness. That means any of the development that we work in Bhutan needs to be aligned with these these four pillars. And since 2008, and then again 2010, first survey was done, then these four pillars are further broken down into what we call 9 domains of gross national happiness, which has 33 indicators, and then around 124 variables which can be measured and quantified. Just is a self-definition type of 9 domains. Just I want to touch because this also talks about our human development, what we're talking about today. Because if you look at those 9 domains about health, that's very important. Educations, no doubt. Then we have good governance, I said, and standard of living. 4. What are those 5 other domains? That is time use. I think that's very important because time, just I want to say over there what time use means, because time use directly actually translates into living. That will count how much you want to sleep or how much you want to work. Because if you work, for example, 12 hours, 14 hours, will that make you happy or not? Or you want to at least only work for 8 hours and again rest for another 10 hours. So that's where it is measured. Those are called indicators. And the other one is again cultural diversity and resilience. That's again another one. And if you look at again ecological diversity and resilience, then we have, again, we talked about much about community. Community vitality is another one that we actually, domain that we measure about. And the last one that I've left, I think I've taught 4, 3, almost 7. I still remain. Yes, I've left one because I think you talked about psychological well-being. That is very important because psychological well-being also plays a role in terms of happiness. And what we do this, and for the happiness index to come in, then at least 6 of this domain needs to be get through out of 9. Then only we say happiness. And happiness are further divided into 4 categories. Unhappy, if the score is below 49%, and 50 to 65 we consider is called happy, narrowly happy. Then if you are there at 56, yeah, smile. Excellent. And 56 to, again, 76, then extremely happy, And then if you are above 70%, it's deeply happy. So this is how the happiness is being measured there. And a little bit going other side, then all the policies, whichever policy we develop in Bhutan, goes under a screening process of these GNS values, and that needs to be adhered to projects and programs again. And for example, we can say if any of the program projects are, for example, whether it is a sensitive, GNS sensitive, GNS negative, GNS positive, GNS neutral. And if any of these are GNS negative or neutral, then government will try to enrich those programs, try to actually work into it and then to again add it to the GNS value. So this is nutshell about, I think, I've just in brief what GNS is all about. Now next, coming to the point that how this GNS actually is inculcated into solar as well as sustainable renewable energy, let's say. Let me go back myself actually when I started my career in 2003 in the government, and in 2008, I think first time when we were working on the 10th five-year plan, then the rural electrification actually started there, and then we have a master plan developed, and which we found that around 88% will be grid electrified and 12% will be off-grid. And I am from the off-grid sector. That is, then only option left was that solar, and that time, then the government again aggressively moved to extend the grid, and that time I can tell that actually per household, it will cost us $2,500 to $3,000 per household for grid extension, and that is no way that economically viable, because anything below $1,200 per household was feasible financially, economically, but not beyond that. Then government took a social stand and they pushed that up to 3,000. That's what I want to say. Around that time, if we say Indian rupees, it was 1,20,000 per household, and that is they consider the social window, not the economic window. If it's economic, no one will go beyond that. But they took that social window to electrify for the grid extension. Number one. That's why today we have 99 point, let's say 8 or 99.9% electrification rate in one of the least developed country. And then 12%, what we can do about that? Then first time again, government has given their own national budget to electrify using solar. And the first time I did the tender for 400 households in the rural communities. And then we have bought 924, I remember the figure, sets of solar PV with 8-watt system. That is the only thing we can give access only for lighting. And that's only given because 2 or 3 light poles we gave it because it was very, very expensive that time, because I'm talking about 2007 and 8. And when 2010 only we have 10 gigawatt of solar globally. So that is the solar market then. And particularly touching about the solar influence in the human development in that context, for example, I would like to give my own example because I come from a village, and then I wasn't having any light in my village, and we walk again to the 3 to 4 days to the community where I'm talking about that we electrify the 400 household. It's not easy. Your road access is there, but you have to go 4 days to reach that village, and you have to come back, and you have to carry all the solar panels on the back of the horses, and then reach there, and that's how we have electrified those houses. There is some batteries also. Again, it's quite heavy to carry all those balance of systems were carried, and that's how we did that. And why we did? Because there's a social element, as we said, in human development, because it's far-flung. And even today, that last mile connectivity in Bhutan is a challenge, because it is 7 days walk if you want to go there and come back 7 days. Is almost, it takes 17 to, let's say, around 21 days actually in total. And still we have those pockets unelectrified and very, very expensive. And only way you can transport the material is through helicopter. So that is what we call a last mile connectivity. Can we achieve that? Can we work together? That's something I think, and where the human development, where the happiness, because happiness means, I think, as I said, not only actually internal happiness is eternal, as well as external material happiness. That needs to be actually balanced out and equitable and in equilibrium. So I think solar can play a major role in my opinion, because it provides reliability of whatever we have extended grid. Also, there is an unreliable power supply. There is a power interruption. Can solar bridge that gap? Can solar access and then provide electricity to the last mile connectivity? So these are the where actually ISA is really working. And if we, I just want to highlight I like that vision very much, because every home, no matter how far, will have light at home. That is our vision at ISA, and we are standing by that to work and hope we can do that by 2030, that every home will have a light at home.
I think that when this is the beauty of it, right? Like when you bring in your own personal experience, you kind of understand where, like how, what is the impact of it. Before this session, we had a session with the indigenous peoples, and they, in fact, talked about this. They said, look, if you're looking at a solution, you're going to be sitting in the cities and say, maybe you have to have a mini grid. It's not going to work. It's actually when you are there on ground, you will understand where what we are going through or what we want is when you will understand what we like, what you need to do. So I think that's where Bhutan and how Nar talked about his own example really becomes relevant. But I have to be honest here. When you were talking about the indicators, I was kind of mentally calculating how do I fare in the happiness. It doesn't look pretty. Maybe that's the homework for all of us to just see where we stand in terms of happiness and how Bhutan measures it. And maybe there's some lifestyle changes ahead. But that said, I think we're coming to nearing the end of the conversation, and it will be unfair if I, don't give a chance to the audience if live or if sitting here who have questions. I think we already see a hand up. I'll just.
Thanks very much. Can I address the question to the Honourable Minister from Fiji, please? I had the pleasure earlier this year of using an electric outboard engine, and it was very clean and not noisy, but not very powerful. But presumably that technology will develop very quickly. So apart from finance, how quick do you think Fiji could become, could phase out fossil fuels completely?
Thank you for the question. I think for the information benefit of everyone, like Fiji, my country has a total of around 300 islands, and we are connected through ocean. So it is something that we have just beginning of the year, our cabinet has approved a energy policy that is going to take us to the next 10, 30, and next 50 years. And one of the objective is to now introduce, not only introduce, and also apply renewable energy into all the aspects of our economic activities and also things that we do back at home. As we speak, nearly all the providers in terms of sea transport in Fiji do operate on fossil fuel, and it's something that we are striving at the moment because it's also part of the SDG to make sure that we are part of that commitment. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that's something that, as you just said, something that the government is really seriously considering, and because it's part of our commitment, because also one of the champions of not only introducing but also applying all the green energy systems that we have. Because when it started off in COP 2023, that's something COP 23. That's something that something that we have been striving for, and hopefully, the next 5 to 10 years should be able to bring that into fruition. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I'm from a peace building background and also working on climate actions. So this is I have a doubt. So this doubt is for so long. So I think this is the right time to ask. So my doubt is regarding the sustainability in using the solar panels. So we know like we are advocating for the solar energy and we are installing the solar panels. But after maybe like 10 or 20 years, how that is going to be, like whether this become a new issue of waste, like how like in case of after after the age of using these solar panels, like how will that be a challenge for the humanity then, like reusing, or how that will be. So that's my doubt. So is there a specific panelist you'd like to ask the question? Anyone.
Can I go? Okay. Thank you for the very, sorry, my voice a little bit, for the excellent question, and it's a very, very pertinent one. Just to give a little background on that, what ISA, we are not only advocating and promoting solar installations, but we have a program number 8 that looks after solar PV and battery, no, solar PV, solar and battery waste management, because all solar, for example. And one, I would like to correct first, there is not 10 to 12 years because now solar panels can last up to 25 to 35 years. That's there. And I just want to give you one example of that back because rather than, I think I'll come a little later on that. My own some life actually experiences I would like to share on that. But um, we are not only because, of course, there's a limited knowledge in the south, but the knowledge has been quite used in the northern side. Actually, even in the European countries, they have done a lot. And the best is that how do we exactly manage in the hierarchical of our waste management cycle that we do any with electronic waste or any of the plastic waste. That is, so first is reduce, reuse, and recycle. These are the three bottom of top-down approach, I think, a bottom-up approach. And then what we can do is then can we have the entire ecosystem of bringing back those waste into a life cycle, actually recycling, and then get those materials whichever we are losing it and back to the ecosystem so that sustainability aspect can be addressed. For that, we are doing now more on the knowledge repository program because currently, actually, there's, as I said, market maturity is much lower in this in our region, and then we are working on that, and then we already have developed few reports on this, and we are also developing some guidelines how we can manage that, and then we can become more responsible socially as well as then bringing back in the question. That is one. The other example, what I would like to tell, I think just to inform you is that like when we were studying in 2006 to 8, when I was doing my master's in renewable energy in Germany, and some of our colleagues were also studying in KTS, that's in Sweden, and then we were also looking at, and they were looking particularly about the panel life, because as you mentioned that, so I thought that why can't I also a little bit talk on that. And life of the panel, because that time when we were testing that time, there were panels up to 30 years, there were panels 20 years, 30, up to 30 years, and in their rooftop. And what they did was that they studied those panels, tried to see the degradation level, and then some micro cracks. So two parameters was studied, and they found that degradation level were 2 to 5% only after 20, 30 years. Number one. Number two, there were only around, I think they have around of the total. Actually, I don't know how many they. I think I just forgot that. But then only 9% of them have some micro cracks. They found that means all can be reused with almost the same efficiency that what actually it was there. So from that perspective, reuse becomes a very, very essential element, I think, how best we can bring back in our ecosystem and use it. Only now, I think, consider everybody knows because we are very efficient and efficiency has gone much higher than that time. So that may play a really different role, but then there's again economics going to come up. But what I say is that if we can use back, that will be the best solution so that we can almost reduce, let's say, almost 60 to 70%, 80%, if you already minimize by reusing that, then only left which is recycling or some other, I think whatever, there are some issues. So I think that can be managed, in my opinion, is not difficult, but I think we need to be responsible and responsive.
Yes, I think we have. You want to start and then maybe.
So
Yeah, so we actually started looking at this because we have this program looking at 25,000, solarizing 25,000 primary health facilities across India. And we're working in partnership with IRENA and WHO to take that forward in sub-Saharan Africa as well and look at 10,000 primary healthcare facilities. And we realized, okay, at this scale, we need to be clearer about what that space looks like. So we had just done kind of an initial consultation with people in the e-waste space. And I think what we're understanding also, and Narji has already covered a large part of how it could work. One aspect of the solar panel piece that I just like to add is that it's now, at least within the Indian government regulations, it has now come under what is called an extended producer responsibility, which was otherwise only for electronic waste and for let's say plastics and other things. But what what people in the sector were saying is that this means it's a welcome move, but it doesn't mean everybody has figured it out. It means that they will have to do more work on looking at, what is the cost benefit analysis when you look at recycling of solar panels. How are you going to actually do it from a scientific point of view? What does it, because you can take out the aluminum, but the cells are laminated with the glass. So there is some level of effort that will go into either setting up certain kinds of facilities that allow for that recycling. But as I was saying, the warranty on a solar panel is about 20-25 years. The efficiency reduces over time. But now you're giving the producer an added responsibility to think through this, which means structures will also come up in that sense. The second component is the battery itself, which right now lead acid batteries are being recycled in the same way that you recycle your car batteries. That is not to say it is always hygienic and safe. There are a lot of questions around what are the conditions of laborers who are having to deal with lead acid batteries, but there is some kind of structure for it. And the third component is the inverter, largely, right? Which I think there are mixed, some part of the inverter is electronics, and that goes into electronic waste recycling. Some part of it is like the aluminum, the steel, the components of the structure itself. So I think the broader point that I'm trying to make is that there are pieces that we're also trying to understand. We've learned that this extended producer responsibility will push a little more in terms of figuring out how solar panels can be better recycled. And right now, a lot of panel manufacturers are still talking about second life. Like so I was saying, reuse, recycle, a second life for these panels because it's reducing efficiency. It's not that one day it just stops working. It's just that it's not producing electricity at the same rate that it was earlier.
No, thanks. I think a lot has already been said, but I just want to bring in the aspect. So when you talk about solar, okay, the life cycle assessment in terms of the emission, they would not be like zero, but you have to compare it with the other options available like fossil fuels. Comparatively, those are significantly low. So that's the best solution available if we have to go with the climate friendly options. So we also have to see with this lens. Of course, there will be some emissions. We cannot say it's like zero through the production even to the end, but comparatively those are significantly low. Now the second part is about access, and then we were talking about the DRE. We also have to see the social side of things as well. We cannot really put up like a thermal power plant in a remote settings. So renewables also provide in that way an innovation, like a DRE can be a solar home systems, it can be like a mini grid. So we also have to see with that. So I would say when we talk about those issues, those are like right questions, and we really have to look into it. And fellow panelists have talked about the recycling. But I think we also have to see that what's the best option available for us, and those definitely are solar and other renewable energy technologies. There has been a lot of effort put in terms of recycling the panels, that's what we was talking about, especially the panel part. But most of the components of when we see the solar system in totality can be recycled. She talks about inverter, batteries, even the panel frame, aluminum, and all those things can be easily recycled. It's just that the silica part of the things that has to be recycled, and there has to be a technology. We have to find out a way where it doesn't become like too much of a waste. Then last point is about the standard and quality control, and that is why this is important. So I mentioned about tier 1, so this is what ARENA and other agencies, they also push for it, and there's like a global consensus that with all those solar PV solutions, it has to be a tier 1 with like 25 years of life. With the system lifespan around 10 years because of the inverter and all that. Because what really also have affected some of the markets in different part of the world is that the quality control. Because initially the solar panels which made into the market were not very of a good quality, and people actually bought them and then installed them, because a common man doesn't really differentiate between like a tier 1 or tier 2. They go with the cost. And quality, when come with the poor quality, the cost is also low. But then the system failed, and that also creates like more of like a waste for the solar PV as well. So that's why I think from the government side, the regulation on the quality, more checks in form for the import part has to come in. From our side, we also have to look into the point that what are the best options and solutions available in the market that we can deploy. So I just want to come in just to build up on what colleague said.
So I'm just going to give you a very lighter note on this. Is that you heard the perspective from all the three panelists, and how I see it is the beauty of solar energy is going to be that even because recycling is going to come in, it's going to create jobs. From a human development perspective, it actually will be even helpful at that point. Even at its end of life, it's going to probably give jobs to people. So that's the benefit of solar energy from a maybe a human development or humanity perspective, as you asked. So I think we don't have time for more questions because we are kind of running short of time. And since this is the last session, I don't want to make it longer. I'd just like to invite my colleague Sudhanshu to give the closing remarks. You've got one?
Thank you, Sunana. Hello. Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Sunana. And I was not expecting that such a technical. I was just thinking about this particular session will be more about the commercial and technicality which is involved in, solar related domain and what commercial activities will be required for development of human capability in terms of implementation of solar projects. Rather, it has astonished me in terms of, let me tell you, it is very qualitative as well as, I should say, we have concentrated upon the impact it is going to create into the life of people as per their requirement. And it is beneficial for the developer also to first understand about what is the requirement of the particular person, consumer-wise, particular community, as well as no doubt, Surbi, you have very well explained about the customization which is required, in which solar can be very much useful for creation of, I should say, about the financial perspective also, as well as, the amount of business it will be going to create. So that is very important. And thank you, Mr. Kamran. You have very well explained about the last mile connectivity, about how, it is very much important to even for a consumer which is very located in a very remote area, and what type of solution is required to be, given it to them. And last but not the least, I was surprised by the way you have explained about national, habitat in that particular. What I should say that I'm quite index, and the points that you have made, which has contributed, and how solar will be going to contribute towards the the consumer in terms of happiness, in increase in the happiness index in that, as well as no doubt you have very beautifully explained about what ISA is doing, and thanks, Honorable Minister. It is always a big pleasure that ISA is very closely, engaging with Fiji, and we are looking forward in a very good way, very positive way, to scale it further in terms of solar mini grids, rooftop, so healthcare segments and all. Thank you very much. Your contribution is very much required. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you to all the panels. Thank you very much.
So just before we close the session, we have just a small token of appreciation for all our panelists. And
So.